Today we're going to be talking about segment and angle bisectors, and we are going to start with defining the word midpoint. The midpoint is the exact center point of a segment, so the middle of a segment. And the way we can find the midpoint of a segment, if we know the beginning and end points, is we find the average of the two x values and the two y values. And what this looks like is if your two endpoints are x1, y1, and x2, y2, your midpoint formula can be found by using x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. So if we want to find the midpoint of AB, for example, A is point -2, 3, and B is 5, -2. So we'll label our points x1, y1, and x2, y2. And to find the midpoint, we're going to use this formula right up above. So we are going to add together the x's, so -2 plus 5, divide those by 2. So basically you're finding the average of those two values. And then add together the y's, 3 plus -2, and divide those by 2. So when we do that, we get 3 over 2, or 3 halves. And 3 plus -2 is 1, and so the other one is 1/2. So there is the midpoint of segment AB. Okay? So we'll call this the midpoint of segment AB. Now, if we are given an endpoint, such as 2, 6, and we're given the midpoint, -1, 5, and we'd like to find the other endpoint of the segment. So let's think about this. If our endpoint is 2, 6, that can be our x1, y1. Remember our formula, x1 plus y1 over 2. Oh, I'm sorry, x1 plus x2 over 2. I'm sorry. We'll erase that, make that a little neater. And y1 plus y2 over 2. All right. So if our point is 2, 6, we know that if we use x1 plus x2 over 2, we should get the final x value of -1. So let's plug those in. x1 plus x2 over 2 is going to give us -1. Well, we know x1 is 2, so we have 2 plus whatever our value is for x2 over 2 equals -1. We're going to do the same thing here with y. We know that y1 plus y2 over 2 is going to give us our y value of 5. We know y1 is 6, so we'll plug that in. 6 plus y2 over 2 equals 5. And now we have to just solve these equations to find our missing numbers. Well, first of all, if you multiply each side by 2 in the first one, your 2's cancel. So you have 2 plus x2 equals -2. Subtract 2 from each side. So we have x2 equals -4. Let's do the same thing over here. We're going to have to multiply each side by 2. So we have 6 plus y2 equals 10. Subtract 6 from each side. And we have that y2 equals 4. So our other endpoint is the point -4, 4. Now, moving on to our next page, we're going to talk about bisectors. Bisectors are segments, rays, or lines, or planes that divide a segment or angle into two equal parts. So for instance, if I have this segment Actually, no, I'm not going to put the arrow here. There we go. So if I have this segment and it has endpoints A and C, okay, anything that divides this into two equal parts will make it a bisector. So for instance, let's say that I have point B here such that AB and BC are equal. So B is a bisector, or B is the midpoint, I should say. B is the midpoint. I should have said B is the point for the bisector to go through. So if I just draw another line, it can be a ray, a line, a plane, whatever I want it to be, so that it goes through this. And it can go through at any type of angle. Notice it's slanted. It divides AC into two equal parts. So this ray, for instance, let's call it ray CD. So ray C, oh, actually I can't use C, I've already used it. E. Ray ED, and here, this is the point where E is. Ray ED bisects segment AC. Okay? So let's take a look at another way in which you can use a bisector. It works with angles as well. So for instance, let's say I have this angle. Okay? If I were to have a bisector, now this is not going to be drawn to scale. A bisector, I'm just going to try to make it look like it's pretty equal. A bisector will divide an angle into two equal parts. So these two angles should be equal to each other. And if we actually want to talk about them, let's say this is angle ABC, and this is ray BD going through it. What should happen if BD bisects angle ABC? The thing that should be true is that the measure of angle ABD should equal the measure of angle DBC. Okay, so for example, let's say that the measure of angle ABC equals 60 degrees. What would be the measure of angles ABD and the measure of angle DBC? What would those measures be? Well, you'd have to split up the 60 degrees between the two of them. So if you divide those by 2, they'd each be 30 degrees. Okay, so that's how bisectors work. Now, if you look at the next page in your outline, we are going to actually do this part in class. We are going to use a compass and straight edge without measuring with a ruler or a protractor, and we are going to bisect segments and bisect angles. But it's something that we're going to do in class so you can follow along with me with a compass. So these two things will be saved for class time. Thank you very much for joining.